The stadium clock in Doha didn't just stop, it froze. In the 94th minute, the air inside the arena wasn't composed of oxygen and nitrogen anymore. It was made of pure, vibrating electricity. When the ball left the Iranian forward's boot and kissed the back of the Egyptian net, the sound was tectonic. It was the sound of a nation exhaling decades of sporting frustration. Players collapsed, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of a miracle. The Iranian bench was a blur of white tracksuits sprinting toward the corner flag. In that singular, crystalline moment, Iran was through to the knockout stages of the World Cup for the first time in their history. The math was simple. The goal stood. The dream was real. But then, a man in a neon shirt placed a finger to his ear. The celebration didn't die, it was executed. In a sterile, air-conditioned room miles away, a group of men began a microscopic autopsy on a moment of joy. They weren't looking for a foul. They weren't looking for a handball. They were hunting for a single, stray pixel. This wasn't a refereeing decision, it was a digital assassination. Why does the most human game on Earth now belong to the machines? To understand the magnitude of what happened in those 4 minutes of VAR review, we have to look at the numbers that define modern football. We are told that technology brings fairness. We are promised absolute accuracy. But in the high-stakes theater of the World Cup, accuracy is often a weapon used against the spirit of the game. When the referee halted the restart, the confusion was absolute. The Egyptian defenders weren't even appealing. Their goalkeeper, El Shenawi, was slumped against his post, a man defeated by a superior tactical movement. The Iranian players were already hugging their coaching staff. Then, the screen flickered. The dreaded VAR review graphic appeared. The stadium fell into a sickening, artificial silence. The commentators began guessing. Was it a push in the build-up? Was there a marginal handball near the halfway line? No. The reality was far more clinical and far more devastating. The officials were looking at Law 11. Specifically, they were looking at the positioning of the Egyptian goalkeeper. In a standard football match, we rarely think about the second-to-last opponent. Usually, the goalkeeper is the deepest player, and the last outfielder creates the offside line. But in the chaos of this final attack, the Egyptian keeper had ventured out to intercept a cross and failed. He was caught in no man's land. This meant that the lone Egyptian defender standing on the goal line was now the last opponent. According to the strict mathematical letter of the law, the offside line was no longer drawn from that defender. It was drawn from the next Egyptian player further up the pitch. This is a rare geometric anomaly that happens in less than 1% of professional goals. It is a technicality that belongs in a physics textbook, not a world-class sporting event. The VAR booth began drawing lines. They zoomed in until the grass became a blur of green squares. They weren't looking at the player's body or his intent. They were looking at the very tip of his shoe, a millimeter of fabric. A microscopic overlap of digital ink. The proof provided by the broadcast was a cold, three-dimensional rendering that looked more like a video game than a football match. It showed the Iranian attacker's toe was approximately 1.4 centimeters past the imaginary line. Think about that number, 1.4 centimeters. In a game played at full sprint, where the human eye can only process roughly 30 to 60 frames per second, FIFA is now adjudicating success based on distances smaller than a coin. The camera used for these reviews typically captures at 50 frames per second. At a full sprint, a player can move several centimeters between those frames. This means the exact moment the ball is kicked is actually a mathematical estimate. Yet, based on this estimate, a goal that changed the trajectory of a nation was deleted. The goal was chalked off. The scoreboard flickered back to 1-1. The Iranian players didn't argue. They simply fell to their knees. It was the look of men who had been robbed by an invisible hand. But the robbery isn't just about a single point on the table. To truly grasp the numbers don't lie perspective, we have to look at the financial and institutional architecture of the World Cup. A single goal in the group stage isn't just a statistic. It is a multi-million-dollar pivot point. Reaching the round of 16 guarantees a national federation an additional $4 million in prize money from FIFA. For a country like Iran, where footballing infrastructure is often hampered by international sanctions and limited domestic funding, that $4 million is transformative. It is new pitches. It is youth academies. It is the salary for a world-class coaching staff for the next 4-year cycle. When VAR hunts for a pixel, it isn't just checking a rule. It is potentially reallocating millions of dollars of development funds based on a toe cap. Historically, the offside rule was never intended for this level of scrutiny. When it was first codified in the 19th century and later refined in 1925, the goal was simple: prevent goal hanging. It was a rule of fairness designed to stop an attacker from standing behind the defense and waiting for a long ball. It was about preventing an unfair advantage. Does an Iranian striker gain an unfair advantage because his shoe is 14 millimeters ahead of a defender while both are sprinting at 20 miles per hour? Of course not. In fact, the biological margin for error in human reaction time makes such a distance irrelevant to the outcome of the play. By enforcing the rule with this level of robotic rigidity, FIFA has moved away from fairness and toward bureaucratic perfection. They have prioritized the tool over the task. This brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of the evening. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was exactly how the system was designed to work. FIFA's obsession with the product has led them to believe that technology equals legitimacy. They want a game that can be packaged, measured, and sold as a flawless digital asset. But football is not a digital asset. It is a chaotic, emotional, human endeavor. The implementation of semi-automated offside technology is a $50 million investment designed to remove human error. Yet, in removing the error, they have also removed the humanity. Consider the Egyptian defense in this sequence. They were beaten. They were tactically outclassed. Their goalkeeper was out of position. Their center backs had lost their markers. Under every traditional metric of footballing merit, they deserved to concede. But the machine gave them a reprieve. It rewarded bad defending because of a technicality that had zero impact on the goal itself. The data tells a grim story about the VAR era. Since the introduction of high-level video review, the average time of a dead ball situation in the final 10 minutes of matches has increased by nearly 35%. We are spending more time watching referees talk into their sleeves than we are watching the ball in motion. For the Iranian fans who traveled from Tehran, Shiraz, and Isfahan, those 4 minutes of waiting were a form of psychological torture. They stood in the heat, watching a giant screen, waiting for a group of officials to tell them if their joy was legal. This is the death of the spontaneous celebration. We are training an entire generation of fans to hold their breath after a goal. We are teaching them that the roar of the crowd is secondary to the verdict of the booth. When the no-goal decision was finally announced, the energy didn't just leave the stadium, it curdled. The psychological impact on the players is even more profound. Football is a game of momentum. It is a game of belief. When Iran scored, they were the better team. They were ascending. The reverse goal didn't just reset the score to 1-1. It acted as a psychological anchor. For the final minutes of the match, the Iranian players looked like ghosts. They were playing against the Egyptian team, yes, but they were also playing against the feeling that the universe, or at least the technology governing it, was rigged against them. How do you maintain a high press when you know that even a perfect execution can be undone by a digital ruler? How do you throw your body into a tackle when the very definition of success has been moved behind a paywall of proprietary software? This is the underdog tax. In a tournament like the World Cup, the big nations, the Brazils, the Frances, the Argentinas, often have the depth and the star power to overcome a bad VAR call. If a goal is disallowed for France, they have the bench strength to go and score another. But for a team like Iran, opportunities are scarce. They rely on the miracle moment. They rely on the one perfect transition, the one lapse in the opponent's concentration. When you use technology to strip away those miracle moments, you are effectively reinforcing the status quo. You are making it harder for the underdog to break through the ceiling. The numbers don't lie approach reveals that VAR disproportionately affects teams that play a counterattacking style, the very teams that rely on marginal, high-speed breaks to win games. Let's look at the second-to-last opponent rule again. By FIFA's own admission, the rule is one of the most misunderstood in the game. If 99% of the global audience watches that goal and sees a legitimate score, and only a computer-assisted official sees a violation, who is the game for? Is it for the billions of people who love the sport? Or is it for the 3 people in the booth who love the rulebook? We are witnessing a transition where football is becoming an exercise in compliance rather than a display of skill. FIFA has turned the World Cup into a laboratory for tech companies to showcase their tracking software. And the Iranian national team was the unwilling test subject. The fallout of this match will be felt for years. It won't just be a footnote in a Wikipedia entry. It will be the "what if" that haunts a generation of Iranian footballers. What if the keeper had stayed on his line? What if the VAR official had used a different frame of reference? What if we valued the clear and obvious standard that VAR was originally supposed to uphold? The original mandate for VAR was minimum interference, maximum benefit. In Doha, we saw the exact opposite: maximum interference for a microscopic benefit. The benefit was a mathematically correct offside call, but the cost was the integrity of the competition and the heartbreak of 80 million people. When we look at the statistics of the game, the 52% possession for Egypt, the 12 shots for Iran, none of it matters. The only number that matters is the 1.4 centimeters that the computer decided was more important than the game itself. We are told that this is progress. We are told that we cannot go back to the days of hand of God goals and massive refereeing blunders. But there is a middle ground between total chaos and total sterilization. There is a world where we allow for a margin of human error because we recognize that the game is played by humans. By removing that margin, FIFA has created a product that is technically perfect and emotionally hollow. As the sun set over the stadium, the Iranian players stayed on the pitch long after the final whistle. Some were staring at the big screen, perhaps hoping it would flicker one more time and correct the correction. Others were just sitting on the grass, staring at their boots, the same boots that were deemed illegal by a camera in the rafters. The Egyptian players, to their credit, didn't celebrate the draw with much fervor. They knew they had escaped. They knew they hadn't won the battle. The machine had simply declared a truce. The group stage standings will show a 1-1 draw. The history books will show that Iran failed to progress. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't show the tears in the stands. They don't show the silence in the locker room. This wasn't just a bad call. It was a glimpse into a future where the beautiful game is managed by algorithms and adjudicated by pixels. It is a future where the roar of the crowd is always followed by a 3-minute wait for permission to be happy. FIFA didn't just break Iran's heart. They broke the very mechanism of sporting joy. They traded the soul of the World Cup for a digital ruler, and in doing so, they proved that they know the price of everything and the value of nothing. The dream was killed by a toe. But the wound was inflicted by a system that has forgotten why we watch football in the first place. The stadium lights eventually dimmed, leaving the pitch in a hazy, artificial glow. The fans filed out, their flags folded, their voices quiet. In the distance, the hum of the city continued, indifferent to the robbery that had just occurred. But for those who were there, the memory won't fade. They won't remember the tactical shifts or the substitutions. They will remember the moment the world stopped, the moment they were told that their eyes had lied to them, and the moment a computer screen decided that a miracle wasn't allowed to happen. It was the night the machine won. The empty seats now stand as silent witnesses to a match that ended in a stalemate, but felt like a funeral. We are left to wonder if the game can ever truly recover its spontaneity. Can we ever celebrate a goal again without looking at the referee's ear? Or has the dark room in the sky become the ultimate arbiter of our emotions? The Iranians will go home. The tournament will continue. The perfect digital lines will be drawn again tomorrow. But the question remains, at what point does the search for perfection destroy the very thing we are trying to protect? Football was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be us.